Hey, welcome to 7 Tech. My name is Curtis. I'm the creator of this channel. Today we'll be doing a upgrade of this computer here. It's in an old Cooler Master case. Really, it's not too much of an upgrade. It's really just a beautification. But once you see the inside and how it's configured, it'll probably be an upgrade too once we work on some thermals. Yes, thermals is one of the reasons that the owner of this PC reached out to me. The owner's name is Perry Kivolowitz. I apologize if I mispronounced that. But if you check out his Wikipedia page, I read that he has created the first known keylogger for Unix systems. He's also created some software that's used in major motion pictures, such as Forrest Gump and Titanic. Pretty interesting guy. You should look him up. Anyway, what he's using this PC for is for some machine learning. So he has 2 GPUs in here, and they have to be starving for air. I mean, just take a look at them. The second reason he reached out to me is to beautify the case. He wants a white PC case. He wants the white fans, RGB all over. And he's got the Lian Stimer cables, Lian Infinity AIO, Lian Uni fans. And to top it off, we've got the Lian O11 Dynamic Evo XL, which some of you may have seen in my previous video where we did the first look and unboxing of it. Well, this is the video where we're going to build in it. The first thing we have to do is disassemble this whole system. So I've got all the new stuff out the way. Let's dive in. Now that we've got the motherboard out, we can give it a quick look over. This is the Asus Prime X99 Deluxe 2 motherboard. It has 128 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz HyperX RAM. And the CPU that's in here is a Core i9-9920X that was released in 2018. Has a base clock of 3.5 and a boost clock of 4.5. It's 12 cores, 24 threads. Pretty nice CPU. Now that we've got the power supply out of the case, we can take a quick look at it. It's an EVGA Supernova 1200 P2. It's a 1200 watt power supply with an 80 plus platinum rating. Let's take a look at the GPUs. This one is an Asus 4070 Ti Super. And this protective film does not need to be on there. That doesn't help thermals. The other graphics card is an MSI 4070 Ti Super as well. Pretty nice looking cards. It is finally time to start the build process. The only thing I did off camera was get the power supply cables out of the old case. Nothing to it, just pull them out. There's a few of them zip tied to it. Next step is to get the motherboard tray out of this case and lay it down and get everything that we can mounted onto the motherboard tray before we put it in the case. I believe we'll also pull out the fan mounts. They're removable, and we'll mount all the fans onto the mounts before we put them in the case. Anything we can do outside the case is what we're going to try to do first. We'll start by removing some panels. Now, got the motherboard tray out. We start mounting the motherboard. You want to make sure your case has all the motherboard standoffs installed. You do not want to screw your motherboard directly down to the motherboard tray. This one does have all the standoffs already installed. Kind of come in at an angle and then come down. You don't want to drag the motherboard across the standoffs here. So you're kind of aiming to get your rear I/O into that square that it goes into first, and then set the motherboard down. Now you have the 9 screws. So I guess that's about all we can mount to the motherboard tray. Is the motherboard. The RAM's already in, the processor's already in. If you had an air cooler, you'd want to go ahead and mount that now. We have a liquid cooler, AIO, so if we mounted that on there, you'd have this big cooler radiator hanging off the side while we're trying to mount into the case. You wouldn't want that. Don't put your graphics cards in yet. They're big and heavy, and just don't do that. They're so easy to put in, you can just slide them in while they're in the case. The next thing we want to do is install all the fans onto these fan mounts. Being able to do it outside the case makes it a lot easier when you can just drop this in the case after the fans are installed. So we're going to move to that. One thing I like about these Lian Uni fans is that they interlock together, and you have the connectors, the electrical connectors for the RGB and fan power. So we're going to lock 3 together. And we want these fans blowing into the case. Oops, I got one the wrong way. There we go. We want these blowing into the case. Fans, unless they're a reverse fan, always blow through, how can I say that? This grill that you have on here. This is always the sucking side, and this is the blowing side. The grill is always the side that it comes out on, unless it's a reverse fan. So we're just going to line these up, flip it over, and install the screws. The next thing we want to install is the AIO onto the fan mount it is going on. This is going to be the vertical fan mount that is next to the motherboard. So if you watched my review of this case, you saw it comes with these blanking plates to cover up the empty space. I think I'm going to put the empty space at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and clip that in so we can line up a radiator and get to installing it. Now for the top fan mounts. Remove this filter, grab our fans, connect them again, same way. And now this is the top, so they're going to be mounted on the bottom, and we want them to be blowing through it because it's going to be as an exhaust. So this would be the top this way. So we want them to blow through there. This is the side with the grill, meaning blows that way, like that. The other thing to do with the Lian Uni fans is connect the wire. You have a connector here. You can see the little notches that the little feet go into. Drop it in and slide it over. Now, if you want the wire to come out the other way, which for this particular mount we do, because this is the back of the motherboard or the back of the case, so we want it to go through the grommet over this way, you slide this off, it lifts up, flip your wire over, and then where the little cutout is, that's the side that the wire comes out. And slide it back, but don't disconnect the actual wire. So you have to hold this part while you push the cover back. Now that we have all the fans mounted and the motherboard mounted, we can go ahead and slide them in the case. Secure them with the 2 screws. And again for the top fans, drop them in. And 2 screws to secure them. And now we can move on to putting in the AIO. It has a cool little mounting mechanism. This little screw here, it's not a screw for any reason other than to be able to push it. You push this back and it releases this little catch here that holds the mount. So we're gonna feed the AIO through. You see these little notches here. They fit in those. And you tilt it up and it just clips in. If you want to get it out, like I said, you push that and pull it back out. Now we can move on to putting the motherboard in the case. Oh, no we can't. There's a fan to go right here. I almost forgot. So let's get that mounted. Most AIOs, including this one, have a piece of plastic on here. Don't forget to peel that. I actually know someone who forgot to peel that off and ran his computer like that and could not figure out why his CPU was hitting 95 to 100 degrees. And now everybody's favorite part, power supply and the mess of cables that go along with it. In this case, has a lot of them. So first thing we want to do is go ahead and plug all of our cables into the power supply. You don't want to have to try and plug these in while the power supply is already in the case because it's going to be a pretty tight fit. So let's get to it. Now, let's get Medusa into the case. Okay, the next thing to do is get the 3.5-inch hard drive and the 2.5-inch SSD installed into a drive sled and get the sled into the drive cage. But we only have 2 drives. We're going to put them both in the top. So I want to remove this one out of the case. That way we have a lot more room to manage all these cables. Now to get the cages out, or the drive sleds out, you unscrew this little thumb screw, slide this over that way, and they just pull out. Drives installed into the sleds. Now we install them into the cage. Slide it over to closed, and tighten it down. They're in there. Almost the easiest thing you can do in a computer is install a graphics card. In this case, 2 of them. They're very simple. You remove the PCI slot covers and slot the graphics card in and plug in the extra power cables to it. And with this case, it actually came with a GPU anti-sag bracket I almost forgot about here. So we're going to install that before we install our graphics cards. First thing you do is this is the actual part that comes in contact with the graphics card, and it gives you this little piece of rubber to stick to it. Let's go ahead and put that on there. And now that goes here. Screws on. And now you have this adjustable little graphics card bracket. The next step is to pull these screws for the motherboard back out. And then install these extra standoffs. Put the bracket on the standoffs and screw it down. Now there's a thumb screw back here to hold the PCI slot retainer, and it just flips down. I'm going to remove 3 for this big graphics card. Put the bigger of the 2 graphics cards in the top slot. And all you're looking for is for this to slot into here. There's really nothing else you need to watch other than to just make sure that's going where it should. Flip this back down, no screws needed, just the 1 thumb screw. Graphics card is installed. Now the GPU anti-sag bracket. There it is. Now we'll install the next graphics card. We're going to put it in the bottom slot. That way they're not starving for air. And I believe it's going to be the bottom 2. There's a clip on this one. The other 2 were actually broken off. If you have a brand new motherboard, make sure you open the clip and then install the graphics card. Flip the cover up, reinstall the thumb screw, and that's how easy it is to install a graphics card, aside from the power cables. We'll route them shortly. One more thing to show before we move on to the cable management is this motherboard 24-pin power cable. But this is the Lian Stimer cable, or Stimer, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, and it actually has LEDs on it. And you can animate the lights running up it like it's flowing power into it, or you could change each strip to be a different color, really whatever you want. And it's going to go right here, so we're going to go ahead and run it before we do the cable management. Route it through the side grommet here, and then plug it to the motherboard. Man, look at this mess. Time lapse incoming. here it is, completely done, aside from the side panels. Let's do our first boot. No movie magic here. This will be the first boot for me as well. So let's see how this looks. Turn the power supply on and power button. So I got a little preoccupied here with watching the boot process and forgot to explain what was going on. First off, I did do one thing off camera, and that was replace the CMOS battery because it was dead. So the BIOS is more than likely back to stock. So what's going on here is you'll see a red and a yellow light near the top right of the motherboard, and it's kind of alternating between the two. The red light is your CPU diagnostic light, and the yellow light is the DRAM diagnostic light. So what's going on right now is it is training the memory. That's why it's hanging on that yellow light for longer. It's going to train the memory, possibly reboot, do another training until it finishes the memory training process. And what memory training is exactly is a little beyond me. I'm sure it's some testing and then some organizing the memory. Basically, it's just getting it ready for use. Aside from just marveling at my work, I'm now just waiting on the BIOS screen to come up. And there it is. On this screen, I'm noticing that there's only 96 gigs of memory showing when there's 128 installed in this system. That's also at the bottom saying that it cannot detect CPU fan and to press F1 to enter setup. This is expected because there isn't a CPU fan installed. There is an AIO liquid cooler installed. I've sped this next part up. It's just me realizing that I need to get a keyboard, plug it up, so I can enter the BIOS and tell the BIOS to ignore the CPU fan error, so it will continue to boot to Windows. With the first boot, we had a few problems. The first one was the CPU fan error. That was to be expected because we don't have a CPU fan. We have an AIO pump plugged up. The second problem, and more concerning, is the memory was only showing 96 gigs, which means 2 sticks in here were not registering. Off camera, I have unplugged all the RAM and reseated them again, and now we're going to boot and see what happens. I also got a keyboard. Here we go. Oh, turn power supply on. So it's stuck on the DRAM light again. Just went off. Maybe it's detecting more RAM this time and it's retraining. Still on the DRAM light. Now we're on the VGA light. And we've got a boot light. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up because it's basically me just looking at a blank screen because the monitor came unplugged while I was moving it. I end up unplugging some SSD cables, blah, 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 plug them back in, try to boot, still nothing on the screen. It happens to the best of us. And there we go, I figured it out. Let's have some claps. The monitor came unplugged. All right, so we got our RAM now, showing 128 gigs. Let's hit enter to enter the BIOS. Oh, no. We want to press F1 to run setup. AIO pump is registering RPMs. Resizable bar, let's turn that on. The RAM is only running at 2133 megahertz. We need to turn on XMP. So we press F7 for advanced mode. Go to AI tweaker. And here we go, XMP. Now it's running at 3200 megahertz. Somewhere in this BIOS is a CPU fan ignore. And that's what I'm looking for. Maybe it's under monitor. Here we go. CPU fan speed ignore. So let's go to save changes and reset. Okay, and we should boot to the OS now. There's the Windows boot. There we go. One last thing I'm going to do, what I have to do is we're going to shut it back down. I'm going to plug up all the drives again and just make sure it boots with all drives plugged up. I hooked up the 2 SATA drives. I plugged in the other NVMe M.2. The other thing I did was move this from coming out straight down and moved it to come over so these two match. I think that looks a little better. So let's turn it on and make sure all the drives are detected. There we have 2 SATA drives and 2 NVMEs. Looks good to me. Let's get to the Windows boot screen and we will be done with this build. Good to go. Bring in that oh so sweet before and after. Well, my mic decided that it was not going to record audio for this clip, so the best I can give you is a voiceover. If you enjoyed this video and this build, please consider giving me a subscribe and a like. And if you live near the Alabama-Mississippi state line down on the Gulf Coast and you have a PC that needs repair or one that you'd like to have built, consider reaching out to me and maybe I can help you out. And you can help me make some content for my channel. You can find my contact info as well as links to everything I used in this video down below in the video description. My name is Curtis. Thanks for watching 7 Tech. Really? Can you get out? Hurry up.
Just put me on your thing.